So, my name is Shawn, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Shawn.
I was really honored and surprised when those guys asked me to be the speaker. I've done speaker meetings before, but kind of meant something special doing it here. So, I'm going to start in the middle of my story because you'll see why in a minute. So, the date was June 12th, 2018. School had been out for a couple days, and I was on my summer break. I was a teacher. I'm retired now. There was an incident that happened like the last week of school that was just really bothering me, and I couldn't let go. I had this girl in class that had her cell phone out, and we got into the cell phone battle or whatever. And next thing I know, I was getting called down to the principal's office, which even as an adult and a faculty member, getting called to the principal still doesn't sound good. Anyway, she accused me of like sexual harassment or something like that, and it totally unfounded. It all worked out all right, but I started thinking, a 13-year-old kid has that amount of power thrown to threaten my entire career with a false accusation, and I couldn't let that go. So on that day, June 12th, I started drinking my normal routine, first thing in the morning. I got pretty wasted. I actually, until this past, I built a rose garden with bricks and everything else. I did a really, really good job. I don't know how. I was totally wasted. I guess I talked to the neighbor that day, and he didn't even expect anything or whatever. But by that afternoon, I was really toasted. Around 3:30, I sent a text message to my wife. You better get me in treatment or something along those lines, or I'm gonna blow my effing brains out. Well, that led to her freaking out, calling the police. Next thing I know, I was passed out on the couch. There's a cop trying to wake me up, and people going through my house with like assault rifles and stuff. They had the whole neighborhood blocked off. And this is where my first sponsor, he's since moved away and everything, but I don't think I could be even close to as good of a sponsor as he was. He came over to our house. They gave me a choice of either go to jail or go to treatment, and my sponsor at the time, his name was Mike, picked me up. I went to my therapist's office, and I was going to walk out of his office in Milton and walk all the way home to Janesville and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, my sponsor, Mike, took me up to Meriter, is where they ended up getting me a spot up in Madison. And at 9:30 that night, and I had to look up the paperwork to document it, because every day really is a blessing, because at 9:30 that night, and I tell people this, I don't know if they really comprehend it, but my blood alcohol level at 9:30 was 0.931, almost 12 times the legal limit, well beyond where people die. So God was not done with me yet. I swear Jesus whispered in my ear that night that, we're not done with you. So, meanwhile, I was in the hospital, and it's like in a movie or whatever. I pull the IVs out, there's blood squirting out all over, and my sponsor, he just shakes his head, he's like, what are you doing? Anyway, so, but, I still have this manipulative personality. I only stayed up in Madison in the psych ward for, 3 or 4 days, and I talked my way out of it. They were going to put me on this medication that I can't remember what it's called. It's supposed to like make you sick if you drink or anything. So from this point on, the rest of the story is a miracle. That's why I start in the middle. So I'm going to start off with my top 10 list. If you're familiar with Jeff Foxworthy at all, or David Letterman's top 10 list, it's kind of what this is, but mine is you might be an alcoholic. So, number 1, you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is head to the garage to take a couple swigs. You might be an alcoholic. Number 2, your wife finds your bottle, dumps it. That's no big deal. I got a whole bunch of them. 3, you refill empty water bottles with vodka because nobody will know the difference. Number 4. This is one of my favorites. Some of you guys might relate to this. You hide bottles in the live well of your boat because no one in their right mind would stick their head in that stinky mess looking. Number 5. You find a bottle you thought was empty, but then proceed to drink the little dribbles in the bottom. 6. When you go to buy booze, you stop looking at the brand and instead go for the highest proof. You know, at one time, I really liked Malibu rum, but that's like way too weak. Number 7's a good one. It happened more than once. I don't think Wendy ever knew about this, but you have to puke, but don't quite get the car door open in time. Number 8. I've heard a lot of people did this. I thought I was the smart one, but you have your liquor stores mapped out because you don't want to go to the same one too often and have them think you're an alcoholic. I heard that one's pretty popular. Up until recently, this one still came back on me every now and then. The first thing you do when you buy booze is remove the little plastic spill guard thing in the lip because that slows the flow down. Every now and then I find one in the garage when I'm looking for tools or whatever. And number 10, my wife's favorite. You're glad most bottles are now plastic because it doesn't hurt as much when she throws it at you. That did happen. So just a little background. I don't want to get into it too much, but my family history is, I don't know if it's a generational thing or what. We were not the lovey-dovey, huggy, kissy, say I love you kind of family. We were the kind of family that, you know, if you didn't talk about it, it didn't exist. Everything was about appearances. You know, our house always looked perfect. Mom kept everything spick and span or whatever. We didn't really have like spoken expectations. It was just kind of implicit. You know, you better do good in school. You better be good at sports. All that kind of stuff. First time I remember ever getting drunk was in 1980. I think I was in 8th grade. We were at my girlfriend's house. They had a bar in the basement. We were on winter break, and I got plastered. And a couple of my friends walked me home. On the way home, my mom drove by in her car. I don't know if she saw me or not, but my 2 friends took me home, put me in bed. That was it. No consequences. Nothing other than me feeling sick or whatever. It was just, I don't know if my parents knew, and it was just one of those things we're not going to talk about, we're not going to deal with it, whatever. In high school, I was kind of the popular, cool guy, but I was also the nerdy guy too. I didn't go out and, I was the one that went to bed at 9:30 at night. I didn't really have much direction as far as, you know, I came from a blue-collar family. My dad worked his way up to middle management at the factory he was at. It was still about appearances. You know, I appeared to be popular and everything else. Really, I was a bully, I was a loner, and I was lost. And then I remember when I was a junior in high school, my dad came up to me one day and says, "Your mom's up in Stoughton." For what? She was in treatment. She was an alcoholic. I had no clue. Apparently, they told me later that they used to argue in the basement. You know, it was all about that appearances. If you don't talk about it, it don't exist. Mom went to treatment for 30 days or whatever. I never visited once. Just pretended it never happened. She came back home and it was, I don't even know if she ever went to any meetings. Apparently she did, because she told me when I started getting coins, she's like, "Well, we didn't get those till you had a year. We didn't do a month things." Anyway, so then I went to college, and you know, I was afraid of a lot of stuff. I went to Beloit College. I grew up in Beloit, you know, so I was at college, but I'd take my laundry home on the weekends and everything else. Just kind of lost. I was the first one in my family to go to any kind of higher education. But I joined a fraternity. It's called Sigma Chi. That was where all the jocks went. I played on the football team. And we used to have a thing once a year called the Sig Olympics. And it was all drinking games. And I actually have a video of it. You know, slam a liter, swim a lap in the. We broke into the auditorium and got in the pool and everything, and stand on your head, drink beers. But it was always, I didn't just drink a little. I had to drink until I was just hammered. I ended up graduating a year late. Wendy and I were both in college together, and she's got a year on me because I dropped out for a while and then went back, so we're a year apart. But even with a college education, I worked at Woodman's for 3 years. And then I worked at another grocery store. Then I worked at a factory. I didn't have any mentors or anything to show me what to do with that. Then I got married. I had 2 sons. That's another story. I haven't spoken to either one of them in probably about 10 years. And I'm sure that alcoholism had something to do with it. The first 10 years of their life, I didn't drink. I might have like 1 beer in the summer after mowing the lawn or something. But for some reason, I was able to put that in remission. I got divorced and I got married again. That was fear. I didn't want to be alone. How am I going to manage life by myself? So I married someone I really had no business being with. She was pretty verbally abusive. But that's when I started drinking a lot. I would stay up really late at night playing video games, and it started out I would buy some whiskey and mix it with Coke, and but that takes too long. So after a while, it was just the whiskey. That marriage lasted 10 years, and then I met Wendy. We had known each other a long time, but I was in the same fraternity as her brother. And I was kind of like leaving my sister alone. She even spent the night at our fraternity before. I didn't even know that, but she no crosstalk. No, she denies it, but she didn't want nothing to do with me back then. You can't rebuttal, so. And at the beginning, I was drinking a little bit. She noticed, like, hey, how come my bottle of Bailey's I had in the cupboard was gone? Not really something to drink to get drunk, but it was there. So, but then the pressures of just life and school and everything, and I'm smart, so I'm calculating here. I get home at like 3:30. She don't get home till 5 or 6. I got that window. So I would try to plan, I'd drink just enough so I'd sober up by the time she got home. And that worked for a little while. But then, first it was a little, but the little wouldn't do it, so the little got more and more. And it took a while for her to kind of catch on, I think, because for a period of time she lost her sense of smell. But then I caught myself slurring words, and how the progression goes. And so one day I just came out, I got on my knees, and I told her I'm an alcoholic, I need help. And she's a former social worker, so she goes in social worker mode. You need to do this, this, and this. I looked this meeting up for you. There's these counselings are covered by insurance and everything. And if any of you guys are like me, I'm like, you know what? You need to just shut the hell up and mind your own business and leave me alone. And I dinked around for probably about a year. I would go to meetings. I would have booze in the console of my truck on the way. I would get drunk between the meeting and home. I would just slam it, and I'd be pretty buzzing by the time I even just got home. There was 2 different times I was lying. I was collecting coins, claiming I had sobriety, and one of the hardest things ever to do. I went to the meeting at 10 o'clock and I gave all my coins back in front of everybody and said, I didn't earn these. That happened twice, But then that June 12th, 2018 happened, and that was it. It was done. So the more I look at it and the more I've been around AA, fear ruled my life. Just fear. Fear of everything. Back to childhood, growing up. Fear of what other people might think, especially. Fear of looking stupid. Fear of failure. I was paralyzed by fear. Fear kept me from doing I missed out on so many things over that time period just because I was afraid. But fear is a liar. I've come to realize fear is probably, at least for me, Satan's number one tool. If he can whisper in my ear and make me afraid of something, the devil's down there doing a dance. Fear of rejection. I always had trouble with girlfriends. And it was because if I got someone to be going out with me or whatever you want to call it, I was afraid of losing it. You're afraid of losing something you have or not getting something you want. I was always afraid of losing something, so I'd just smother people. I was the helicopter boyfriend, and that just pushed people away. So eventually it was just easier not to do things than to risk it. Zero risk. Play it as safe as possible. I looked this up and I researched. I had heard different, but fear not or do not fear appears in the King James Bible 103 times. I had heard it's one for every day of the week. There's probably different references, but those two phrases 103 times. And since, through the steps, you got to turn your life and your will over to the care of God as you understand Him. It's easy to say. It's really hard to do. But it's progress, not perfection. One thing I've realized is, God is always there for me. Always was. If I mess up, there's always an escape route. But when I add alcohol into that equation, that escape route either didn't seem very good or I didn't even want to explore that option. So I got some of my favorite Bible verses that reference that. Isaiah 41:10. I've got that tattooed somewhere. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. I've told people, my God's a loving God, but my God kicks ass too. Kicks demons' asses. Every morning when I pray, I say the serenity prayer. And then I add to that, get behind me, Satan. I have the blood of Jesus on my side, and I know what that means to you. And for the most part, that helps a lot. 2 Timothy 1:7, for God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. Psalm 34:4, I sought the Lord, and He answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Joshua 1:9, one of my favorites. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous, do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And Proverbs 29:25, the fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. And I have to remember, God gave the devil domain over the earth. They can pretty much do what he wants because God wants you to turn to Him for protection and comfort. And I have to remember that, the devil wants, 1 Peter 5:8, be sober-minded, get the booze out of there. Be watchful, your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. And he's always there looking for any little chink in the armor. Anytime I'm questioning something or doubting myself, God wants nothing but good things for me. It's my humanness that messes that up. A lot of times I hear people talking about churches or religions. To me, when Jesus talked about the church, He meant His people, His followers, not a building, not some denomination. Those are all created by humans. And why are they all created by humans? Because humans can't agree with each other. You should do it this way, you should do it that way. The greatest commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, love each other as Jesus loved you. That's it. You know, so a lot of time I got it tattooed on here, WWJD, and Wendy brings it up, and it ticks me off sometimes because she's right. What would Jesus do in this situation? Well, no matter what, he would love the person because they're one of God's creation. That's really hard to swallow sometimes. You know, love your enemy as yourself. That sounds easy, but it's really not. You know, so AA meetings. I carry 2 books. I was going to bring them today, but I didn't want to be lugging them around. You know, everyone's seen me with my little bag of goodies. 2 books in there can answer pretty much any question I have in life, and a lot of times they both do. They just reference it or talk about it a different way. The Bible, number 1, and the book of AA, which in a lot of ways, you know, those guys back then were smart, and Bill W. would probably told you he was smart if you know anything about him at all. But there has to be divine inspiration to write that stuff in there. I mean, it was written 90 years ago now, and it still applies. So I was talking about fear. I didn't start coming around here until a couple years ago. You know why? Because I was afraid. These biker dudes and just people, you know. But it was that fear, you know. I didn't want to stick out. I didn't want to not fit in. Blah blah blah. You know, all those lies that Satan likes to speak in my ear. Good advice for anyone starting out is, you know, shop around for meetings. Meetings are like people. You find some meetings you like. Sometimes a meeting I don't like probably does me the best good, because I don't know about anyone else. If something's good for me, I kind of question it or doubt it, or I still got that in the back of my head, or that resistance. You know, I've sponsored a couple people, and it just never worked out because I'm kind of a get busy living or get busy dying kind of person. You know, if you get to 4th step, 5th step, or whatever, and you want to hesitate and you want to jack around, go with someone else, man. I'm not all about that. You know, get going. I did my, you know, you teach people the way you were taught, and I had to do a step a week. I think I got 2 weeks once on like 4 or 5, but you either want to get better or you don't. You know, there's no dicking around. Another thing that's really important to remember is it's progress, not perfection. You know, you're going to make mistakes. You know, if you never made any mistakes, you would never learn anything. Probably one of the greatest things that I try to practice, Wendy and I practice it a lot in our relationship, and that is grace. You know, it's a really good gift to receive, but if you can give somebody grace, which is unconditional forgiveness, there's no strings attached, but if you can give that, that's even better because it's off my chest. You know, we talk about clean your side of the street. If I keep my side of the street clean, it's on the other person. It's their problem. You know, I don't want to. One of the things I've heard is, you know, renting free space in my head. I don't want to do that. You know, so I bring a lot of this stuff home, and we practice AA in our house. Wendy is well aware of what the word resentment means, and when that comes out, you know, it stings a little bit. But we can get things solved right away. You know, we're not storing them daggers up to toss when the opportunity presents itself. Through my faith, especially in AA, I've realized the past is gone. I used to just dwell on guilt and shame. You know, I was a horrible father, a horrible husband. Listen, I can't do anything about that. And it's all forgiven through that man on that cross. You know, it's the time of year where we celebrate his birth. All that's forgiven. Not because I did anything, just because. You know, that's hard to swallow. And some of the verses that help me with that is 2 Corinthians 12:9. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. And that's one of the AA principles too. You have to surrender. Surrender is not a word that's real popular in American culture. You know, you got to be a winner. How can I surrender and still get victory? Because I'm turning it over to a power that's a lot greater than myself. You know, my humanness is finite. God's greatness is infinite. Ephesians 2:8-9, for grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing. It is a gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. That goes right into the AA traditions of, you know, not sponsoring politics, not accepting money from different organizations. If you know the history at all, at one point Rockefellers got really interested in AA and they basically wanted to buy it. But that's not going to happen, and that's so someone can't say, well, we should do this and this because I gave more money than you did. You might, but if it's anonymous, and you know what, it doesn't matter. No one member of AA is greater than another. No one person is greater than another in God's eyes. They love us all. Romans 6:14, for sin will have no dominion over you, since you are not under law but under grace. Romans 11:6, but if it is by grace, it is no longer on the basis of works. Otherwise, grace would no longer be grace. There's no conditions, and you know it's hard to. You gotta just remind myself of that all the time. God loves me just the way I am. If I mess up, that's okay. Move on. Progress, not perfection. James 4:6. But he gives more grace. Therefore it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. You know, that's why I like AA is attraction, not promotion. You know, you want what I got, come to the meetings, listen to other people, be open to criticism when called upon. If you want to get better, that's the way to do it. You know, rarely have we seen a person fail who has, I think the most important word, thoroughly followed our path. Not kinda, sorta, not doing the steps out of order or doing this one, that one. The steps, when you first start, you go through it step by step. After that, they're all still there, but different ones might pop up along the way. I think probably the most important step for me is step 10. Take care of business, take care of things. If you screw up, make your apologies, move on. If you do a good job of that, you shouldn't have to do any more big fourth, fifth steps or whatever, because you're solving things as they come along. So I want to congratulate everyone in this room, because whether you know it or not, you all have a PhD in alcoholism. You can't get that at school. You could make a lot of progress while you're in school, but you can't really know alcoholism until you've lived it. You know, you can read all the books you want, take all the classes, and you might get close, but until you've actually had those feelings, those emotions, went through everything it entails, you're not truly going to be a member of the club. I try to treat meetings like a never-ending graduate class. I was just talking to someone the other day. Oh, I need to start journaling. What I do in my little book is I got my notebook, and whatever the topic is at a meeting, I write about it right during the meeting. In my grandiose thinking, I'm thinking someday I'm going to die and Wendy will pull it out of the cupboard and publish the best-selling novel from her. I don't know, but it just helps me process what's going on. It works for me. Some people's it doesn't. I think it's important to talk at meetings. I see a lot of people that just sit there day after day after day and Just, I don't know if they're intimidated or that fear factor is kicking in there or whatever. You know, if something's on your mind, throw it out at a meeting. A problem shared is a problem cut in half. And then if you share it again, it's cut in half again. Sometimes just talking about things makes a big difference. I was not a talker going back to when I grew up and everything. We did not talk about things at the dinner table or any of that kind of stuff. And it just stuffed. If you don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. If you don't see it, it doesn't exist. And then, like a volcano, it just all explodes all at once. And Wendy and I try not to have those kind of things anymore, you know. Going back to the grace factor, we have a saying at our house. It's worked pretty good most of the time, is just go with it. What is this? You're getting an Amazon box every day this week. Just go with it. Okay. All right. And then when it's my turn, it's just go with it too. But it helps, you know. Transparency. We try to practice these principles in all our affairs. You know, if there's a resentment, we'll bring it out. Sometimes it's really small stuff. Most of the time, it's really small stuff because we really try not to let things build up. Try to remember, and Wendy and I have talked about this recently too, serenity. And in the big book, it says your serenity is inversely proportional to your expectations. If I've got a lot of expectations and they don't get met, is that the other person's fault? Especially if I didn't communicate them, that's on me. You know, if I can go into things not expecting a lot, it's nice to get a surprise now and then. Another thing that's important, and I try to do for myself, I'm saying I a lot, but I guess I am the speaker. But Wendy and I talk about this too, is what's our motives? You know, are you doing this because you want to stand up there and pound on your chest, hey, look at me, how great I am, or whatever? Or are you doing something to outdo somebody else? What are your motives? One thing I have to really watch myself is getting a laugh at someone else's expense. We were just talking about that on the way here. You know, making a joke that's making fun of everybody. You might blow it off as, oh, I'm just teasing her or whatever, but that can be very hurtful sometimes. You don't realize how much of an impact you have on other people until you're on the other end of that, you know. And love conquers all, you know. The greatest of all these is love. Love one another. We just heard this verse. We were at a wedding last night. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things, you know. What was it the other day? I might need your help here.
No problem.
You were mad at me for something, and I can't remember what exactly I said, but you said, wow, you really have a way of redeeming yourself. What was that?
I know we were fighting about where the dog does his business.
Yeah. I let the dog poop in the driveway, and she don't like that.
You have an autistic dog.
But I said something like, wow, your hair looks really good, or I love you, or something. And, you know, we both ended up breaking out laughing about it. Because in reality, how many things are really that big of a deal and are going to make that big of a difference? You know, that serenity prayer helps a lot. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Most things I can't change. The courage to change the things I can. You do need a lot of courage just to change little things sometimes. And the wisdom to know the difference. And I'm still working on that one. But those 3 lines of that prayer can solve most of life's problems. You know, it's really not that complicated. is this a big deal? Yes or no? Can I do anything about it? Yes or no? And then either do something or just accept it. You know, it's a wonderful life. It's here if you want it. But you gotta want it bad enough. You gotta do the stuff. You gotta practice the steps. You gotta hang out with similar people. You know, the book says we're people that normally wouldn't mix. Just look around the room. You know, but we have that one common thread. I've never been in combat or whatever, but in my mind, it's like people that have been in combat together. You know, we've all been to hell. And we've climbed those 12 steps on that ladder to get back out of that hole we dug. And, you know, all I have is today. I don't know what tomorrow is. And a lot of people around me lately have gotten sick or in the hospital or even passed away. You know, tomorrow is not promised. Make the most out of today. I want to be happy. And a lot of times that's a decision. You know, I can only get pissed off if I let someone piss me off. And I don't like giving up control like that. You know, if someone's trying to irritate me and I let them, they won. I lost that battle. But, you know, I can always stop and pray to God and remember that no power is greater than the one that's protecting me. Now, I'm really big about the armor of God. You got to put that armor on for the devil's flaming arrows flying at you, because he wants nothing but misery for us. And I'm not going to let him win that. You know, so thank you for having me, and that's my story.